Hello and welcome to Sparks, a podcast by the Sagos Group. We're an international leader in L&D with over 1,500 specialists across the globe in 14 different countries, working with some of the world's most exciting brands. I'm Millie Gladstone, your host, and I'm one of the consultants based here in our London office. In each episode, we ignite ideas, explore bold strategies, and spark meaningful conversations with thought leaders, change makers, and learning pioneers from our own directors at Sagos and from other special guests like we have today. So whether you're leading teams, developing talent, or driving transformation, this is your place to stay inspired and stay ahead. So today, this episode is part of a mini-series that we're doing all around leadership and management. We'll be taking a look today at managing a team versus managing a business and how that's different. Today, I'm joined by one of our very own directors, Nathan Rager, in charge of all things sales and commercial, which is a very important job for the business. And also our guest of honour, Cameron Swan, the Managing Director of Active International. So Cam, just tell us a little bit about Active and your role there.
Absolutely. So I'm the Managing Director of Active International UK. We are a media solutions company and part of AMS Group. We provide value solutions for clients that have a media budget or are looking to expand their media budget. So we broadly work in the kind of media agency, media owner ecosystem.
It's a fascinating business, so look it up. Fabulous. Okay, so I'm going to start you off with a little bit of a question just to warm us up. And I want to know when and how you stepped into a leadership role where you were doing more than just managing a team and actually managing the business. Cam, I'll come to you first.
Okay. I think it's an interesting, because when you think about this question, I don't think there's always a clear line.
That's why I ask it.
Okay, well, there you go. So you
starting with a trick question.
Yes,
already.
exactly. Because
My style.
I think there is moments where you are asked to think strategically, but it's never really been part of your job description. So I kind of vividly remember watching a leadership team, and it was actually when I first started at Active that were setting the direction and the strategy, and I was kind of leading a team at that point. And there was a shift in personnel, and I kind of moved into that leadership team. And I remember vividly thinking, okay, we're not here just to talk about what's going wrong, what's going right, and what the numbers look like. We're here to now set much longer term goals than I've ever had to think about before. Okay. And I think that was the moment that I was like, this takes a different muscle and I'm going to have to learn to exercise it.
Yeah, so actually moving from just thinking about your team and the goals that you're trying to achieve there to actually long term, where are we all going at the end of this?
Yeah, while still making sure that the trains are running on time.
Yeah. Very important. And how about you, Nathan?
It's really interesting, actually. I was just hearing you saying that. I completely agree with everything you said, and also have a very different experience. So, because my first job, or first proper job, I went from very student jobs, working in bars and working in warehouses, to Sandhurst and the military, and did a year of training where it was very explicitly, like in the curriculum, this is the management part of your job, and this is what management is, and this is the leadership part of your job. So in one sense, my first real job was very explicitly leadership, and really kind of, in at least that context, very clear about what the differences were.
I think that experience would be really interesting, because I don't think there's never that much clarity for anyone in the kind of commercial space, is there?
Yeah.
But when they can lay it out, this is what you need to do here, this is what you need to do here, go do both.
Yeah.
So when did you realise there was maybe more of an overlap than there had been in the military?
I mean, I think, context by context and job by job, they're very different. The simplest kind of differentiation that's always stuck with me in the Sandhurst and Army training. Management is what you do in camp when there's a process and there's a structure, and it's your job to maintain that structure. Leadership is what you do when the metaphorical something hits the fan, and there isn't clarity, suddenly there isn't structure or process to be followed, and that's leadership.
Okay.
Which, thinking about your job and your company, I was thinking as you were introducing there must be quite a lot of that in terms of the creative, thinking outside of a formalised process of how things should be done.
There is. I think it's interesting in our world, because our company is quite unique and we have lots of moving parts across lots of brands in all different parts of the world, that we're really lucky because we can, our creativity is the only limit to what we can do. So if we want to build a product over here, then there's support to do that. If you want to do something different with the client over here, you can do that. That makes also is a challenge in itself, because if you go into a really kind of highly organized, structured business, sometimes it can be a bit more defined. Where when you're kind of have lots of flexibility and it's very entrepreneurial, you can sometimes get stuck in between the two, and you've got to be able to flex. And I think that's where the tricky part comes in, is learning when you first go into that. How do you flex between those two things? Because both have equal importance. You still need to make money and you still need to do great work, but you also need to be thinking about what's coming next.
So I guess we've kind of sort of started to touch on it already, particularly Nathan, I think. But the difference between managing the team and managing the business, what for you, Cam, is the kind of clearer distinction between those two things?
Clear distinction, managing the team, managing the business. I think you've got to start to park what needs to be done and needs to be done to plan, and what the plan is. I think that's the only way I can really differentiate is, if you think about what I'm doing right now, is that trying to keep the plan on track, or is it thinking about what the plan should be? And so for me, I think it takes, you go from being operational excellence to setting a clear strategy. And those two things are very different, but that to me is the point at which you kind of flip, and that point of change. So is that an operational role, and is that an operational task, or is that really setting us up for the future? And is it about setting the plan versus keeping the plan on track?
So it's almost like a bit of mental agility to be able to zoom in, zoom out at the right time. Was that a difficult adjustment when you first started?
So I don't think anyone in our business, and maybe I'm doing myself a disservice, I don't think anyone in our business would say I am perfect at knowing when to zoom in or zoom out. There's always a moment of zooming in, just because I think that's quite comfortable. When you know what's happening and you know what should be happening, it's quite easy to zoom in and hone in on it. Where sometimes it's more difficult to zoom out, and that's different for different people. But I think when you're really operationally in touch with the business, and which is kind of my role and where I've come from within our organization, I think it means that I don't always zoom out at the right time. It sometimes can be a little bit delayed, but I certainly zoom in when I need to.
Yeah, get into those details.
I don't think anyone's going to argue that, myself included.
And how about for you, Nathan?
I mean, I think I'd say very similar. It's really interesting hearing that laid out. But yeah, I think it can be quite hard, and has to be sometimes a conscious choice to, like you say, very often people in leadership roles have got there by being very hands-on and very in touch with how things are done and how things work and how things should work. And it's very hard to do both consistently. So sometimes there's a conscious kind of need to pull yourself away from the zooming in.
Yep.
Even when, you can zoom out when something's going wrong, when something's hit the fan and suddenly there's change, and then you need to. But being able to do that preemptively, almost, that kind of stepping back and thinking ahead, thinking about the what ifs. Okay, we've got this plan, and rather than trying to make sure I execute this plan, I'm going to let the team execute that plan, and I'm going to choose to think about, what if that plan was to go off the rails, or what should the next plan be, or what the next stage should be, and that can be a lot less comfortable.
Absolutely. And I think that it's what you do in those moments when you know you're not doing the right thing. So if you get to the end of a situation and you I was really zoomed in there and I really shouldn't have been, I needed to be out. So working on the business, not in it. I think deciphering what was it that drew you in. Was it behaviors that you need to change for yourself, or is it capabilities that you need to build within the team that is going to change how you would react to that situation next time? So is there something missing that means that you are not feeling comfortable being out? Or is it you that made you not feel comfortable? And deciding, because it can be both. It could be there wasn't the resource, the people, the support to make sure that I didn't need to be there. And so how do we make sure we build those capabilities and ensure that the behaviors of the others are there to support what you think is most important?
There's two really interesting things that will come out there. It's almost like the pre-mortem is what you're talking about. It's like, what if this goes off track? What are we going to do in that case? And then the kind of post-mortem of, okay, why did that go off track? How do you balance that thinking in the positions that you're in?
I would say they could be one and the same, but I think if you think, okay, what's going to go wrong? What could go wrong here if I'm not in it, as opposed to looking at it? Then you make a decision. And it's incomplete information always when you make that decision. You know, something that you think might happen may not. But if you're worried about it and you believe it's your role to make sure that that doesn't go wrong, then you make a decision. So when you talk about the pre-mortem, it's, I don't believe I can be not involved here, so I'm going to get involved. But the most important thing with the post-mortem is, how can I make sure that decision is different next time? Because if it isn't the best use of your time, what do I need to do, or what do I need to change, or who needs to change in some cases to make sure that I can make a different decision with incomplete information next time?
Yeah, I like it. I like it. So I guess transitioning a bit into kind of the how, I think we've established pretty clearly that you need to be able to do both zoom in, zoom out, cloud to ground type thinking, pre-mortem, post-mortem, lots of planning, lots of reflection. But how do you know when it is the right moment for you to either be stepping in or to be stepping away? Or is there a right moment?
I mean, I'm hoping
the impossible question.
Yeah, it's an interesting. So I just purely personally for me, and this could get quite interesting, Millie, certain members of my team who you know very well are doing an extremely good job at the moment of actually not needing the kind of zoomed in approach. And something that's an interesting journey for me is actually just accepting that and not feeling like I'm not doing enough because I'm not involved enough, and relying on people to say, actually, we need you to zoom in here, or to have some more input, or to be more involved. And I think that's a great place to be with an experienced team. But it's not a simple equation, because I've been in the same position where I've been too hands off and too relaxed, and people haven't known or haven't felt able to ask for the support, and I haven't provided it until it was too late, and then it became a post-mortem, not a pre-mortem. So I'm not sure if that answers the question, but it is.
No, I think it does. And I think we're starting to break down a little bit some of the skills that maybe if we're thinking about a manager who is transitioning from team to business, like communication, I guess, in that instance, thinking about how you're briefing in work, whatever, letting people run with it, delegating, also getting to know the people and build up the relationship levels there. Anything else, do you think?
So I think back to your original question, we're kind of trying to determine when you need to flex between the two. Yeah. Some people have the luxury of not having to, right? Some people have the luxury of, and the bigger the business, the more likelihood there's someone there who's 100% strategic only, and there's someone who's 100% operational. Maybe that's not as common as people think, but I think it would happen. What struck me when you were saying that was, you need to let people fail or learn for themselves for them to be able to really understand and learn what they need to do differently. And so I think even sometimes, and I'm guilty of this, when I zoom in, it could just be a innocuous learning opportunity. It's not going to be business critical if it goes completely wrong, but it could be absolutely kind of developmental critical for them long term, because they could go, okay, that's not the way I want it to go. So they run their own post-mortem to say, okay, I'm going to do that differently next time, and it hopefully doesn't go that way, where they wouldn't have even had that opportunity if you're in it.
Oh, this is so juicy. Okay, so that's also a really hard balance, right? Because probably as a manager, if you're watching someone maybe start to go off the wrong path, do you not just want to jump in and course correct, or...
Absolutely.
But you resist to help them kind of have that space?
I would like...
If it's not business critical, obviously, yeah.
I would like to think that I resist sometimes. I don't know. This is a really good question.
Over their shoulders, they're typing.
And I think, we kind of have this... To give people the right time and bandwidth, and it wasn't designed for this particular reason, we started talking about involved versus informed. And so what do people need to be involved in? And I've witnessed this in our organization and elsewhere before. Everyone's involved in everything. Everyone's involved. And you end up with almost all emails are all company emails. And you're like, this is just not what's required. So if you look at it and go, do I need to be involved in this, or do I just need to be informed at where it's at? I think if you can master the informed, you can make sure that nothing business critical goes completely wrong, because you know what's going on and you know when you need to course correct, to your point. And the luxury of that is you may never need to, or you may need to passively intervene at some point so that people can learn, but still not end up with a disastrous result. And I think we're not talking about surgery on small children here either. Like, I think that's probably important to note.
Yeah.
So business critical to us is not life critical. It's just we want to make sure that we're still growing and that we're growing at the right pace and that we're keeping our clients really happy. So you don't want things to go wrong, but if they do, chalk them up as a learning exercise and make sure it doesn't happen again. I wonder if I practice that as much as I just said it. Someone else will tell you that, I'm sure.
Yeah, we've got your team coming through. Exactly, so you'll be fine.
Is that when you start sending TikToks like, maybe you should be doing this? Or
Yeah, it's like passag. You should really watch this 30-second TikTok about leadership qualities and operational excellence. Yeah, that is not that uncommon.
So I guess thinking about your personal experience a little bit more then, when you were transitioning from being manager of a team to a bit broader, did you have like a moment of kind of shock or like realization or a challenge that happened to you that you thought, okay, I actually need to like dig a bit deeper here and start thinking a bit differently?
I probably a couple of things there, albeit kind of off the cuff, that there's probably been a couple of commercial instances where I've realized that I can put out that fire right now and hopefully get an okay outcome. But what I'm not doing is preventing it happening again. It's a bit like the analogy we used before, that if you're a manager, and it's not diminishing responsibility, but if you're a manager, you're keeping the car on the road safely. But if you're a leader, you've got to make a decision whether that road's taking you anywhere or it's the right road, or whether you need to take an exit. And so I think I probably had a realization not that long ago, probably before I moved here, that I was becoming really good at putting out fires and making sure people felt good. And the post-mortem for them was like, you dealt with that perfectly, thank you. But what I probably wasn't spending enough time was, how do I make sure that doesn't happen all the time, and I'm not just spending my time doing that. So it was back to that kind of point of, how do you make sure you've got the right capabilities and behaviors in everyone else so that you're not having to go and do that all the time. You can spend your time making sure it doesn't happen. And so I think that to me is probably one of the main examples of where you go, all right, I'm now no longer that, I'm that. The second part, which I think is interesting, and people will probably watch this and be like, what were you talking about? But I think when you drift, or you very kind of actively go into a role where you are leading as opposed to managing, I think people naturally assume that comes with control. And the more senior you get in an organization, the more you realize you just got to juggle more stakeholders. And so your strategic vision still has boundaries. I could say, and not that this is a live example, but I could say our UK business should be doing this, this, and this is what we're going to focus on. But there could be someone in our global business that says that's absolutely not not the vision we have for our entire global entity. So it doesn't necessarily mean leading, you're going into control. You've got to realize that actually it's a different way of navigating the same sort of problems over here. Yes, you've got to focus working on the business rather than in it, but it doesn't come with infinite control.
Interesting. It makes me think of one of our president, actually, the US office always uses the metaphor of like the umbrella and the microphone. So it's like, what are you shielding from above and amplifying like down to your team?
Yeah, it's a really good analogy. Might steal that.
Yeah, it's nice, isn't it?
But it's true, like the umbrella and the microphone. And it's true and sometimes that's a really positive experience. It's not a negative thing, but it doesn't mean that the road you might think you need to take, you can naturally take that exit and head on it. You've got the car running really well with the right team, but you've got to make sure that there's a lot of variables around that road and that direction.
I love the road analogy as well.
I don't know where that
Are we
came
even
from.
going anywhere?
Oh yeah, we had a road stop. We've been on this
dodgy
roundabout
roundabout for the last 6 months now. What's going on?
Yes, this is It's like yeah.
How about for you, Nathan? Was there like one big challenge or something that comes to mind?
Honestly, I'm totally sidetracked now by just the mental image of Cam running around the office with a fire extinguisher, looking over people's shoulders and like squirting their laptops.
Yeah.
It's probably
That's all I can think about right now.
you could actually get footage of that.
Yeah. But it is, and I think that kind of ties back to the point earlier about allowing people to fail.
Yep.
It's like knowing when stop, let's do it this way is the right approach versus, are you sure you want to do it that way? Versus, sure, go for it. Let's see what happens.
Yep.
And that kind of, so I think the original question was kind of, was there a tipping point or a key sort of moment? In one sense, no, but that kind of gradual adjustment of flexing different ones of those kind of mental muscles of like, I'm going to actually bite my tongue here. Like, this could go, it's not how I would do it, but I always like the another phrase that I've held on to from early days, you can delegate authority, but not responsibility. Yeah. So it comes down to the point that's like someone in your team, if they do something and it's wrong, it's still on you. But you have to give people the power to make their own decisions. Yeah. So it's that kind of mental triage almost of like, how bad could this go? Yeah. And often I think the hard transition in that process is going from, is being able to say, it's not how I would do it, but that's fine.
So I think you use 3 examples there, and I'm going to get them wrong now, but I think they are all, they're different scenarios, aren't they? And when we talk about making decisions with incomplete information, one is let's try something different. One is let's weigh up the risk that how badly could that go, and how do we make sure that they understand and fail fast and learn? We might need to fail fast over here too. And one is my job is to make sure shit doesn't hit the fan.
Yeah.
You avoided saying that word before, and I just came out and said it. Maybe that's the Australian in me. But that one is absolutely no. Let's quantify what that risk is. Let's try something new. What's the worst that can happen? Yeah, I think you categorize it in 3 areas. It's like danger zone 1, danger zone 2, and holy crap, that's really hot and fiery. And that's
get the fire extinguisher. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. But I think people are afraid to try new things sometimes because of the environment they're in. Yeah. I mean, we should be celebrating when things fail, at least we've been trying something. So there's got to be a point of celebration when it comes to that really didn't work, but we gave it a go. We now know. So there's one less thing to try. I think it was the, I'm going to definitely get this wrong now, but it was, I think one of the crazy billionaires, shouldn't say that online, should I? Putting rockets into the sky. So it might have been X rocket or Tesla rocket. I'm not sure what they call them. And they were clapping and cheering, that video of them clapping and cheering and celebrating when the rocket exploded. Yeah. You're like, hopefully no one was on that. But so I'm assuming not. They weren't. Yes. Or they really didn't like that person. But they were celebrating. And it kind of went viral. But it was like because they knew they'd learned something in that process. So next time was going to be less likely to fail, fractionally.
Yeah. So how can we get to that point? Because failure, I think, often comes with a bit of like weight attached to it, whether it's emotional, or whatever. Objectives aren't being met business-wise. How do we get to the point where actually we can celebrate failures?
I think that, to me, is exactly what we're talking about. That's a leader. That's a leader setting a really clear accountability to trying new things and making sure that people feel they can. But I think it's about culturally making sure your business is celebrating the new stuff and not just celebrating what is already on the to-do list. So I definitely think that, to me, is a behavior that needs to come from a leader. That, that wasn't great. What are we going to do differently? What are the consequences? Do I need the fire extinguisher? But I think you have to set that tone, because if people don't feel comfortable and they don't feel like they can do that, then they never will. for fear of what the repercussions would be.
Yeah.
I don't know whether that answered the question.
Yeah, I think so. To some extent. It's hard, isn't it? There's no like, yep, and that's exactly how you do that one, guys.
Yeah.
So
And I mean, we may not get that right. I might not get that right, but I definitely believe that it has to, that is definitely something that I should be doing, whether it's this business, another business, is making sure people feel like them failing on something that could have been really positive is not a reflection on them negatively. It's they tried something and they were willing to, and they had the kind of courage to give it a go. They know what not to do next time.
it's a bit of innovation mindset almost, isn't it? Like being
100%.
able to actually, yeah, like you say, try something new, not be fearful of the repercussions, unless it goes really, really bad, I guess.
Yeah, I know. I guess everyone's got a different benchmark for really, really bad. Like someone burning in a rocket is probably really, really bad. But
yeah.
Thankfully, they were not on. There was no one on there. But
Yeah.
you know, that could have been disastrous financially to another company. But obviously, for them, that was the steps and the predicted steps they needed to take to get to where they ultimately wanted to get to. And I think everyone needs to think about that and just benchmark it for their own business. You know, I wouldn't suggest someone in a small startup throwing everything they had in their bank account on something that they weren't sure about. That's a different type of risk, isn't it? But making sure that you find that sweet spot of what risk can you take to ensure you're innovating, evolving, and everyone feels like they're doing their best work.
And have either of you ever taken that kind of risk and it's not paid off?
I mean,
That we want to discuss?
yeah, probably. I don't know. I mean, there's been nothing that I can think of that's hugely dramatic, but there's definitely probably there would be commercial decisions we've made that we think we're willing to take that risk and try something new that maybe haven't eventuated or have caused commercial pain, and that just puts more pressure on everybody else. But I'm not sure there's ever been anything that has ever been, noteworthy disaster. Maybe we're not trying hard enough.
Maybe you need to innovate a bit more, is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, maybe I'm not trying hard enough.
But just a few more rockets.
As it came out of my mouth, I was thinking to myself, oh, that's dull. You've never really had a proper rocket explosion. Maybe I need to find my own rocket moment. I'm sure someone's going to be really thrilled to hear me say that.
I love that. Find your rocket moment, everyone.
Yeah.
I've never blown up any rockets, but I did once end up with a very large warehouse full of computers that no one wanted. In a previous job, I hadn't seen this connection, but I was had responsibility, if not direct operational authority over the procurement process in an IT migration. We were swapping out hundreds and hundreds of computers, thousands of computers. And I didn't quite check the calculations of the weekly run rate of how many we actually needed, nor did I check that the people who were ordering them in weren't reporting the fact that the warehouse was gradually getting fuller and fuller and fuller as we got closer and closer to the end of the project, and we weren't using as much as we thought we would. So there was suddenly a crashing realization that we had tens of thousands of pounds worth of machinery that was not ever going to be needed, sat downstairs somewhere in the building that I'd been sat upstairs happily thinking everything was going great. So yeah, that was quite fun. It wasn't quite a career terminal conversation, but it wasn't far off.
And so what would have, out of interest?
I love this.
Sorry.
Management mode.
Interested. What would have been if you didn't have enough computers, what would have happened? And having too many, what did happen?
I guess reading too many, thanks for the life ring, too many was better than not enough.
Okay.
If we'd not had enough, it would have delayed the project and we wouldn't have been able to deliver, and there was a hard deadline because we were going to start getting charged a huge amount of money for any of the old devices that hadn't been swapped out. So yeah, we had previously not had quite enough. So I then adjusted to being well, I know we've got loads coming in, that's fine, nothing's going to stop us, we can keep rolling. But I didn't then factor in but how much have we got coming in? What happened was we ended up, they sat there and got gradually used over many years, and I'm sure there was some creative accounting for them getting put onto other cost centres because people, wanted a new one later, but they weren't needed for that project at that point. So yeah, as you say, it wasn't surgery on small children.
Yeah.
There was no, it was, a 0 on a bank balance somewhere for someone who had a lot of zeros on their bank balance.
But I think, but sometimes those things personally kind of have a different impact, don't they?
Yeah.
A business might be like, but you're like, this is my responsibility, keeps you up at night. I remember those days of, I've made this decision, I've convinced everyone to do it.
Yeah.
If it doesn't happen, what's going to happen? I remember getting threatened to be sued by a client once based on the decision I made. And there was only one breakdown in the entire process to make sure it was absolutely seamless. And without convincing the other party to agree to what we originally agreed to, we were going to be in a lot of a problem. And so although it ended up okay, it wasn't great because neither party were hugely happy with the outcome. See, that doesn't sound so great, does it? But neither party were hugely happy.
But no one got sued.
But no one got sued.
Yeah.
I kept my job. But it made me think every time we entered into that particular arrangement with two clients again, it made me calibrate what I would do differently. And it has lived with me. I mean, I probably was, I reckon I was 26, and, a multinational retailer threatening to sue you at 26 had some lasting impacts. I probably should have had therapy. But it was a big deal. I remember thinking about it nonstop for about a week and a half. And probably the powers of the business I was working for were probably really like, oh, it'll be fine, don't worry about it. And they were probably pretty relaxed. I certainly wasn't. So it did change the way I think about what I do differently.
Yeah. And when you were making that kind of decision to do that deal with those clients, did you have that feeling of, oh, I'm not really sure how this is going to turn out? Or were you like quite confident in what you were deciding on?
I was so confident.
Oh, really?
I was so confident.
This is going to be great.
This is going to be brilliant.
Best deal ever.
Everybody's going to be so happy.
Yeah. So a case of actually innovation maybe in that instance that you then learned something from.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if there is a decision that either of you have taken where you have been a little bit unsure or nervous about how it might turn out, and then how it did turn out for the business.
Ooh. Yeah, I think there's been probably a couple of kind of client specific, from a sales perspective, where this is what we're putting on the table and how we're going to kind of structure this solution. Our business is quite complex. Part of it does a lot. Yes, you do know.
Yes.
You have to teach people, you have to build programs that allow people to understand what we do. So yes, you do know. There is often an element of what we do that is really complex around taking inventory from people that have got too much of it because someone made a bad decision.
Oh, yeah.
If only we'd known.
If only you knew.
Yeah. And then how we repurpose that into becoming a media, like supporting their media budget. So we take the product and we ship it to an end user that they're happy with, and we give them a media credit that they then use. So that doesn't happen all the time now, but it happens quite a lot. But sometimes in those examples, you're trying to line up a lot of things. And so there's definitely been instances where we're entering into a client agreement where they want very specific terms that if we don't agree to them, could mean it doesn't happen. And so you're trying to balance, okay, well, that might be problematic because of the timing. They need it out of their warehouse in a month. We're not sure whether we've got the end user lined up that they've already approved. So there's been a couple of instances where that has gone like wrong, and what was supposed to be 2 months ended up being like 12, and they weren't happy that their warehouse was full. And so you kind of have to talk your way out of it a little bit and make sure that they can see what went wrong along the way. But I think we do it a lot. We're lucky though. We work for a business that, is very comfortable with calculated risk and know what we would do if the worst case scenario happened. This is how we would navigate it. And people are kind of coached and trained through that very early. So I think that people learn a lot about, manageable and calculated risk in our business from a really junior position. So I think that helps.
Yeah. That problem-solving element as well, I think. There's always a little bit of risk, isn't there?
Yeah.
I think with any decision, you can look at the data for, till you see it when you close your eyes. But at some point, you have to let the gut kick in a little bit and lean into your experience, right? And think about, how do you balance the data with the experience as a leader?
And I think that's a really important point. Very infrequently, in some cases it does. I don't think it happens much in our business, but very infrequently as a leader, you have every bit of information you need to make a decision. You have a trustworthy data set that you're happy to kind of refer to and help guide. You can't do much without that. So there has to be some kind of data or intelligence that tells you this is the direction of travel and it's going to work. But there is lots of unknowns that kind of go around that. So you've got some data, you've got kind of some experience, you've got maybe some market intelligence that tells you something different, but then you've got that section that's unknown. Is all of that going to line up to what I really want it to do? So being able to make decisions with incomplete information is really important, and how you go about making them in an informed way, in a credible way, without just trusting your gut all the time. But that's where your gut comes in, and that changes depending on economic climate, political climate. You know, there's lots of things that would impact everyone's decision making. Yeah. But you've got to take the data, you've got to do what you can with that. You've got to take any other intelligence or information that you can possibly kind of triangulate to create a data point. And then you've got to use your experience, your gut, and your kind of instincts to make a decision that you think is right without putting too much risk on the table.
I wonder, as the world evolves as well, the use of AI. Have either of you ever used AI to like help you make a decision or?
Also, something the other day that reminds me, slightly off topic, that it was someone on social media that said, "Oh, but like they got a text saying that someone had stolen all their text messages and photos," and they were like, "Whatever." And then the next text came through, "We've also got your ChatGPT history," and they were like, "No!" The amount of things that we're asking AI to do that we probably should be able to do ourselves, and we're like, "They'll do it faster." So I think AI helps for our business anyway. At this point, I think AI is helping gather information and triangulate that information in a meaningful way much quicker than ever before. But I don't think it's necessarily that supports the decision making, because you have more information, you know, more accurate, more timely. So it does help the decision. But I don't think I've ever said, "Chat, should I say yes to this deal?" Or, "Please review this contract and tell me whether I should say yes." Although I might try that. That's a great shout. It's a good idea. I ask it everything else, by the way.
Really?
Everything.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
It is a good tool. It is a very good tool. And like you say, I think it's really helpful when you are actually gathering data and things like that. It can help you spot like gaps or things you've missed as well, just to have a kind of final check of, you know, what would someone with a different point of view think about this, or, you know.
Because that's almost the where I think some of those kind of like models work really well is we're human, you know, and there is things that we're really good at. You know, we've got thumbs to pick things up. We've got feet, legs to run. We've got things that have evolved over time physically and kind of psychologically and intellectually. But we can still make a mistake or miss something, where ideally, if you can use someone to limit the amount of human error, that's got to be a positive to our overall evolutionary journey, I should.
Yeah. Definitely. It's a crazy world out there. So
really
might as well get AI to help us, right?
Yep, absolutely.
So we started touching earlier on some of the skills maybe that managers need to think about if they are moving from kind of managing a team to managing a business. I think we talked about like communication, building relationships, proactive versus reactive is kind of, I think, what we were touching upon with the fire extinguisher versus no fire extinguisher. What else comes to mind? Nathan, I'll start with you.
I think that there's two things that have been floating around in my head through this conversation. One, tying to that kind of proactive, reactive, like the decision making that we ask people to do, like the risk calculation. And it's one of the classic models that we use, loads of situational leadership, like that kind of frame of actually the different variables in, should I jump in with the fire extinguisher, jump in with a couple of steering, coaching questions, or kind of sit down and be like, no, this is how it's done. And that kind of calculation of thinking about the individual involved, how experienced are they, how motivated are they, what do they need right now? Is it a great opportunity for them to actually test and learn and maybe fail small? or do they actually really need the kind of the encouragement of having a senior person step in and do it and show them how to do it really well? And then there's the circumstances of what are they actually doing? Is it a massive high risk, high value client negotiation, or is it something that actually, okay, well, it'll be fine. It's a good opportunity to let someone explore. So that's one that's really useful, I think, in that sort of management approach, or where to shift to the more sort of leadership. I'm here if you need me. I'm busy thinking about the big picture, but shout if you need, versus I'm looking over your shoulder with the fire extinguisher. The other one that I feel like I'm doing a lot of harking back to the old days now, but the other one that I again take from, I think it was Second World War pilots, but it's called the OODA loop. Observe, orientate, decide, and act. And I think in that more strategic space, that's a really good, very simple framework to have to think in that point of like, okay, actually you need the point of that model is how fast can you make that cycle? So not how complete can you make your observation and how long can you spend gathering information, but actually every time you decide and act, you build up your body of information based on which you can continue to decide. So the whole point is like you're getting ahead if your OODA cycle is faster than the other person's. So that principle of actually making lots of small decisions and keeping that momentum, I really like in that sort of strategic mindset piece of thinking, okay, you can get really bogged down in all of the, the cloud thinking, the big picture, all of the possibilities and trying to anticipate every eventuality. Or you can kind of break it down and think, okay, well, I can see that. Let me think about what that means in my context. What should I do about it? Do it, and then start again.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That's a really good answer.
Yeah, I know. 2 models as well for the price of 1.
Oh, there we go.
Does that mean I don't have to come up with one at all now?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, if there's anything else as well, because I think that if we're thinking about skills, actually continuous learning is something that's really important. And so if there's any resources that you look to or books or anything that you think are helpful for managers
TikTok
making that
feeds.
transition.
Got lots of those. I when you were talking about skills, I think it's been really clear and differentiating between what is and what would be. So between those two things, being manager and being a leader. So if you think about, and I mentioned kind of involved and informed before, but I feel like with a manager, you are involved and you're kind of informing people. So your communication style will be about informing people, whether it's how to do something, what they need to do, or kind of how to improve something. So it's informing, where as a leader, you need to have the skill to inspire, because people need to be on the journey with you, don't they? So you need to be able to, your overall communication footprint needs to be really different. It's no longer, this is what you should do, this is how you're going to do it, do you have any questions? It's, this is what's possible if we get that right. So I think those two things, I think we talk about skills for leaders, I think they're almost the balance or the opposite of what needs to be done when you're a manager. And so I think that being able to inspire, set the direction and make sure you're on the right road, but make sure you're also inspiring those around you to kind of want to be on that road with you, still be running the car.
The storytelling element of it almost of, like you say, this is the future state we're all going to jump in the car, driving type thing.
And I think that then plays down to what you just mentioned, actually, that if I look at what tools there are, and I do think there is a general kind of, we miss a trick sometimes with management training. So going from almost like a solo operator to a management role is a big jump for people, as much as it is a jump from what we're talking about. But I feel like there is more accessible training for that around how to lead a team, as a manager, how do you make sure that there's operational kind of milestones are met? And there seems to be a lot of that around. I think there's less kind of formal training or formal education for how to go from manager to leader. And I think some companies would do it exceptionally well. We do a really good job of making sure everyone is really clear around the difference and what the behavioral difference is and what you should expect and get from leaders versus what we need and require from managers. So I think it's about self-directed. What's going to help you identify behaviors that need to change. So there's lots of books, right? You know, there's a really great book, and I'm going to get his name right. I think it's Leidy Colts that wrote Subtract and the Art of Doing Less. And I mean, you could apply that to any part of your life. Just, you know, taking stuff out of your house, or doing less on the weekends, or saying yes to hen and stag do's, or weddings that are making you travel halfway around the world to go to them, which I wouldn't mind doing, by the way. But I think, you know, subtraction. So what do you need to do less of to enable you to do more? And you've got James Clear's book around kind of atomic habits and the small things. So you're reading, but I think that for people that don't necessarily want to just consume books nonstop, kind of like read, listen, watch. Like, so we kind of try and do that format whenever we're kind of sharing things for a particular topic. So it needs to be self-directed. Read things that are going to inspire you to do things differently and change your behaviors. Watch TikTok, or watch a 3-episode kind of long form video. It makes no difference, whatever format works for you. And, you know, we were talking about it before, but I think you need to change your habits sometimes. So change your format, change your habits to hopefully have a different impact. So if you're reading all the books and you're not making change, then maybe try a different format, or don't just follow the one podcast host. Look at people that are on the podcast that are going to hopefully kind of give you something you don't have, because we can all get stuck in habits a little bit more.
Yeah. And I think reflection is such a key part of that as well, in terms of reflecting on what you prefer to consume maybe, and what format, but also I think those kind of regular touch points where you kind of, like we were talking about with the post-mortem, of like looking back, thinking about what could be improved. Reflect.
Yeah. And I think for a lot of people that they're, you know, when you get to a leadership position, a lot of that has to be self-directed. I don't think you can really improve as a leader when you're really trying to focus on building a high-performing, kind of strategically aligned business. I don't think you can do that unless you've got the willing to self-direct a little bit.
Yeah. Well, that brings me to the end of my questions today. Thank you so much for joining me, both of you, in our new and improved studio as well, with our new setup and lovely neon sign. But we are continuing on this leadership and management journey. So do make sure, if you want us to appear on your YouTube feed and on LinkedIn, you give us a follow, a like, and a subscribe, and we will see you next time.